Hi, my name's Dan Widerski. I am the cost estimator here at Smithsonian Exhibits, and I'm here to give you a talk about budgeting for your exhibit. Um, Slide number one. Cost estimator, I've been doing this for about 20 years. Between working backwards, I was Smithsonian Exhibits, then at a fabricator called X Plus, then at a fabricator called DNP, and then at a fabricator in the Midwest called Split Rock Studios. It's been a fun little journey for me. Started out doing theater and TV commercials and building movies, and it transitioned into a lovely business that I wouldn't trade for the world. I've been with Smithsonian for about 3 years now, and work with this great team at Smithsonian Exhibits. So since this talk's all about budgeting, we should discuss why budgeting matters for your exhibit. First of all, it really helps set expectations for your stakeholders. A good example of that would be if you set a budget that was based on a very graphic project and now you wanted to put holograms in, you would then be able to tell your stakeholders, well, our budget doesn't support that. Let's not develop an exhibit that does that. The budget also helps control the costs and helps guide decision making through the process, especially for the people that are down in the trenches, as well as upper management, as well as the director level. They can see how we've started at X number of dollars, and throughout we've made decisions on the exhibit that adhere to that pathway. Lastly, budgeting creates realistic goals and guidelines for everyone involved. Back to the hologram story. If you want a hologram, then we want to have that be a realistic goal from the beginning and fund it appropriately. Let's see. Next. So we have cost control and owner expectations, which would be all the units, putting together an exhibit, and then we have process guidance, and that's where Smithsonian Exhibits really helps. We have our typical 4-step process in designing, and then through fabrication and installation. So little definition here. Budgeting is provided by the owner. I am doing a 3,000 square foot exhibit. We would like to design and build that for X number of dollars, $300, $400, $500,000. And that would set expectations to work with either Smithsonian Exhibits or an outside fabricator. Estimates are provided by me or Smithsonian Exhibits at each phase of the process. I'd like to remind people that the estimates get increasingly more granular as the project goes on, and typically those estimates are not the contractual line item that you're signing off on. It's helping us give a snapshot of this first idea, really great, 10% over budget. Let's use that tool as something to help either align the budget with the exhibit or increase the budget to fund the new project that you want to see. The final costing is what we do at the very end of the estimating process. That around here we take labor and materials. We have a very transparent scheme. We mark materials up 10% to cover, shipping here and a little bit of handling, and we charge a blended hourly rate for everyone, which is about 2 times lower than the average on the outside. And then typically at the very end of design, that's what all the deliverables and the scope are based on. So lots of trial and error up until the final construction documents, and at that point we know what we're building, we know what it costs, we move on forward and start buying plywood and acrylic and printing graphics and making interactives. Big words, but I will. We have three different types of estimating that I do, and I'll try to point them out for you. Analogous estimating, parametric estimating, and detailed estimating. Analogous estimating is usually done at our very concept phase. This is trying to find something that's similar. Hypothetically, you try to compare prices or costs for a similar exhibit and adjust for scope. Easy math, 2,000 square foot exhibit. It's kind of graphic. Now I'm doing a 3,000 square, and you bought that for $200,000. Let's say it's a very similar looking and feeling exhibit. It would make sense that a 3,000 square foot exhibit would be somewhere around $300,000 as long as we didn't change the type of exhibit. And that's basically what I do during the concept design phase. And then some of the negatives are at the concept phase, you don't really have a lot of details. I know I want an interactive, and I know it wants to provide a question and 3 answers. Is it a flip door? Is it a spinny? Is it a touchscreen? What is it? All those come at different price points. So at the concept phase, we can't really get into like, well, how much does this label cost, and how much does this leveler foot cost? We're more into this area, either by square foot costs or something similar, is how we come up with our concept design pricing. I would also recommend that for you as you're putting together budgets for future projects. Try to find something that's very similar, find out if it had cost overruns, and base your budgets for future exhibits on that. Parametric estimating is more about using historical data. Anyone who is able to be an ERP can go and search out any similar exhibits. For example, let's say that there was a 5,000 square foot exhibit. I hope I'm not, so like for example at NMAI, maybe the Americans exhibit, which was done quite a while ago, but a beautiful exhibit. I might go back and search, how much did we pay, how much did Smithsonian pay for the design of that exhibit? And then how much did they pay to have it fabricated by trying to either talk to our colleagues or search an ERP. That's a good way to, and then take into account that was 10 years ago and cost of living has gone up and material costs have increased. But it also helps with finding pricing for, let's say, display cases or interactives. For example, if we've bought 10 display cases for an exhibit at African American History and Culture, we bought 6 of those, we could probably go back into ERP and find out, was that a $10,000 purchase a case? Was that a $20,000 a case purchase? And that will help inform setting realistic budgets during this phase. For me, this is phase 2 of our design process, schematic design. Typically, I can't reach out to a Gopion or a Glass Bohan or something like that saying, hey, I need a price for 10 cases. How big? Well, about a wall size. Do you need access in them? Probably. How about lighting? Maybe. I don't know. We haven't gotten that far in the process, but we could, look at a custom case that was purchased from somewhere else and say, oh, that was a $35,000 case and that had lighting and anti-reflective glass and. So the negative with this is if it isn't well defined, it's difficult to search out. And if you can't find anything that's similar, sometimes you have to take a guess or move on to the next phase, which is typically detailed estimating. So this is where a designer will, during design development and construction document, that's where I can usually take the list of graphic panels, the list of artifact mounts, and say, okay, there's 15 book mounts and 47 wire mounts and 27 decks, and we're still figuring out interactives, but we're still holding an allowance there. Once again, as a reminder, at design development, this isn't the final cost, but maybe we need to have a conversation whether or not the interactive is a $10,000 interactive or a $20,000 interactive, or if we need to get an integrator or a subcontractor involved. We normally would put labor and materials against every item as we build up to our final estimate. And so once again, it's based on a list of components, graphics, cases, interactives. Specifications get tighter and tighter as the process goes on. I wanted to kind of point out over to my right, your left, there are some chains hanging off the wall. So this is where I would work with a designer to help identify where there are cost savings. For example, the one on the left is a manufacturer called Shimmer Screen. They make beaded curtains for restaurants, sold domestically, not quite as cool looking as the other one on the right. That one runs about $15 a linear foot. The gold chain on the right runs about $120 a linear foot. So that's where involving the estimator can help not squash a designer's vision or a client's vision, that we can recommend some alternate materials or alternate vendors. And that typically happens at this detailed estimating phase, maybe at the slightly before. If there's something that we can't live without, but we're willing to make it shorter or make it bluer, or like I tell most of the designers I work with, I'm not trying to make your round thing square. I'm trying to figure out a way to keep it round, but we'll have to work together on how to bring your vision to life. One of the negatives that we find, and hopefully I once again don't offend anyone either in the room or on the streaming, is that when other groups are involved, sometimes we have to fit into their workflow. So while it isn't, for example, one of our rules is if we need to solicit an IDIQ vendor to help us with fabrication or something, that goes through OCON. So depending on how busy OCON is, I'm not allowed to reach out to them. So if you hear sometimes that we're having a hard time getting a price, it's because of the internal checks and balances that we've set up in the Smithsonian to make sure that we're following all the rules. Like I said, we use all three types of techniques during our process. I would recommend that you guys use the first two techniques. Try to find something similar. Try to find something that, try to be realistic and say this old graphic show and we're doing a new video wall show. They're probably not going to be analogous. They're not going to match up price point for price point. And it probably will have increased a little bit since the last time that you looked at it. Let's see. So into how we make the sausage, we gather information, we choose estimating technique. I'm on ERP all day long trying to figure out what we last paid for acrylic and what we last paid for Garnica and what's appropriate and what it might be in a year when we actually build the exhibit. And then depending on the phase, I pick my method and then we review internally. That's where, I'll talk to our fabricators and our graphics people. Is this a 40-hour case? Is this a 60-hour case? And I'll, like Carlos, I might bother him or his boss Ian and say, let's say we had 5 exactly the same. Would we get an economy of scale? So we're always trying to give best value for our products here at Smithsonian Exhibits, and at the end of a job we do a closeout and find out how we did. Did we underbid it? Did we overbid it? How did it work? What were our pitfalls? So hopefully we can have that continuous learning. As an estimator, I would recommend that every owner carry some contingency. After 20 years of doing this, I see start out at concept. We have some great ideas. We use the contingency up right away, and then there's nowhere to go from there. And you still have a year of developing your exhibit. Typically, I would hold back about 15% at the beginning, and then as you move through the process, you may want to hold 5% at the very end of the design process. So how does that work in real numbers? $100,000 exhibit. Let's develop something for 85 at the beginning and hold $15,000 of contingency. Go through the next phase. We're still doing okay. Get to the third phase. Really like this great idea of this iconic thing. Let's add another $10,000 to the project to fund that without having to go back to redesign. And then at the very end, we'll find that COVID happened and acrylic has gone through the roof, and I remember a story about 10 years ago where wired glass was only manufactured in Japan, where the Fukushima plant was. Schools couldn't open because of the wired glass that goes in the doors. There's only one manufacturer in the world at that point. So things happen that are out of our control. Smithsonian will typically carry a little bit of contingencies so that we're not constantly coming back to our clients. When a sheet of plywood goes from $80 to $85, you don't want a change order. We'll just make it happen. But yeah, by the end of the design phase, you should be ready to have just a little bit money left over, so that during fabrication, if need be, there's a couple extra dollars just in case. Monitoring is important. We have 4 phases, so we try to check in every phase so that you can see where you are with your budget. If there are value engineering opportunities, similar to the chains over on the wall here, we'll offer those up, typically as a deduct. One thing that owners don't necessarily like, but I typically say to them, is that if it's in the drawings, then I have to price it. So typically what I would suggest, or not warrant, what's the right word? Basically, I'll give you a budget that's over budget, and then things that can come out as alternative deducts. Because if it's in the drawings and it's in the estimate, you think you're getting everything. So that's why I can't, get you something in budget and then a bunch of ads, and then, but the last 10 pages are all ads. We need to be transparent with each other. What else do I got here? So Smithsonian Exhibits is really good at designing and fabricating and installing. There are things on the units end that are sometimes overlooked. Space prep. Do you need new carpet? Do you need walls painted? Do you need new electrical runs for this exhibit? That's typically contracted at the unit level through OFM&R. We rarely get involved in that because we have to do the exact same thing that you would have to do on behalf of you in a building that we're not in. So it's a little bit difficult sometimes. In the graphic area, are there any custom illustrations that you need? Is there, when I was at X Plus, the Girlhood look and feel was highly based on custom illustrations, and there was a budget put aside for that, and that was a big part of the project. But that's something at the unit level you'd want to remember. We normally take your assets for photo research and acquisition. So the units are typically providing us all the images. So do you have staff to get that? Do you have staff to research it? I know we have a lot of agreements, with Getty and Corbis and all those people, and we have a very robust library, but typically we're looking for you to provide those images And what is sometimes overlooked is that the staff isn't available to find that imagery and hand it over to us. On the object display section, we have conservation. We don't do conservation here. We don't have any conservators on staff, so making sure that that's done ahead of time, or if it needs to be contracted, that you've thought about that. Any transportation or loan agreements, while we can facilitate some of those because we do have a registrar on staff, it's not as convenient for us. So if you have any loans that you need to arrange, please think about that and if there's any associated costs. One thing I didn't realize until I got to Smithsonian is that sometimes the rotations, we need to have reproductions made. So I was talking to a few people downstairs about like our Guy Clay printing, or we do artifact reproductions so that the real object can come off and we can replace it with a reproduction. So knowing that those aren't typically printed on acrylic or printed on sign blank, that there's a newspaper or some artistic fabrication that has to go on to the edges. Keep that in mind, that those aren't as straightforward. We can do those with our graphics and our different printers and our 3D studio staff. They're very good at that. Do we need to be aware of any rotations? In round one, it looks like there are 15 book mounts, but the 4 further rotations, there's 70 other book mounts that are all for different, so we need to be aware of those. What else do we got? Is it a traveling exhibit? Do we need crates? Do we need refurbishments? Do we need any damage remediation? Are there any security issues that we need to put in there? I believe that OPS takes it from the case to the transmitter, but do we need to make any accommodations for wireless sensors or plungers or any of that sort of stuff? And then accessibility and inclusivity. While I put it at the end, it probably should be at the very top. Have we considered that? We've had a few projects that it has been an afterthought, and there's a lot of work to go back and fit Braille into the graphic layouts, fit tactile objects into a rail that no longer has space on it. Open it up to you. Is there any other things that you guys can think of that I don't see on a fabricator's level that you guys should be? That's true. Yeah, we've had a big push for bilingual exhibits. Audio-visual popped to mind. If there's a big audio-visual component to it, whether or not, it needs to be a consultant that's brought on. Some units have lighting designers available. Some units don't. We don't. So if there is an in-depth lighting design that needs to happen, that might be something that needs to be thought of for your budget.
And just this is to the accessibility question. I mean, those guidelines seem to be changing and evolving, ever changing and evolving. So things that I might have budgeted for last year, as far as accessibility, say like an audio loop in a theater, I might not have budgeted for last year, but now I need to. So you just need to always make sure that you're up to date on the most recent guidelines.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Just curious, dioramas aren't done anymore, are they?
Dioramas are done. However, speaking candidly, some of the restrictions that we have with material usage, how it's fire protected, they seem to be less and less, and more designers are taking more of a designerly aesthetic to them. I think I would say that the Fossil Hall at Natural History has more of a, while they're dioramas, it's limestone.
Yeah, smaller ones.
Yeah, we're not hand reproducing plants anymore as much because of the fire load in dioramas and all that sort of stuff. So
Okay. One other question. Don't tell me it left me. Are there any manufacturers now that's making this wired glass other than that used to be? No.
with the global economy. We were having a very difficult time getting non-glare acrylic because most of the acrylic manufacturers stopped production of that to do just regular quarter-inch COVID shields, and for about, so we had to hoard some non-glare acrylic for a while just to have it for our exhibits.
Are you taking questions now, or are you done? Do you have another slide? I don't want to bust in. Okay.
Basically everything I said at the beginning. Having a budget at the start helps establish expectations. Multiple check-ins are very good. Creates realistic goals for everyone. And then Q&A.
Okay, I have several questions. I will tap you offline, but one that people might be interested. Can you talk a little bit more about? You mentioned square footage budgeting, and I mean, I know it's so different from museum to museum and from type of exhibit to type of exhibit. So, can you speak a little bit more about how you utilize that, or how you might suggest units could utilize that to their advantage?
So I'm in an interesting spot a little bit because having worked on the outside for a while, we would say that a graphic exhibit was budgeted at about $200 a square foot. More interactives was about $400 a square foot. More AV, $600 to $800 a square foot. It doesn't scale well if it is a smaller exhibit or if it is a giant exhibit. So that's where, if you're, if I were to pull numbers, if you had $1 million exhibit and 2,500 square feet, that's a $400,000 or $400 a square foot exhibit. That I would expect that you should get cases and graphics and an interactive in each area, maybe a couple of touch screens here and there. However, if you expected a Washington Capitals video wall that descended and did a bunch of stuff, it might not be appropriate. I've seen some larger exhibits. I'm trying to think of any in my recent past. $2.5 million for 5,000 square feet. That got you a Connect interactive and a lot of new display cases and solid surface countertops everywhere. So.
Anybody else? Because I have one more question. Okay. Sorry. When you were speaking about contingency, my understanding was that, like, if the scope of the project changes, like you do add an interactive down the line or whatever, then that doesn't change your that doesn't eat into your contingency. Is that your understanding as well? Because it kind of sounded like you said, well, if you add this later down the line, then now your contingency goes from 10 to 5%. So, what's your standard operating practice there?
So what I've seen happen around here is that people blow all their contingency right at concept, right. And that was the point I guess I was trying to get across, is that so for that next 9 months, it's like, oh, well, you have this really great idea, but try to be more conservative at the beginning, and then as we find out that you needed the audio booth, I have some money that I can still pull from to fund that, either through a change order to us or through another vendor, but at least your whole project budget isn't completely blown.
Okay, so because the alternate way would be like to go back to the budget people and be like, hey, we didn't know there's going to be we didn't know there's going to be an audio booth. You need to increase the budget of this show. Our contingency still stays the same, and just the overall budget has to increase if you want an audio booth.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. I hope that while we are trying to offer value engineering solutions, to make us, exhaust every single possibility to know that you were already going to fund another case there, trying to squeeze little tiny pieces out of everything to fund the one new thing is, it'd be good to work collaboratively on that. We're all one SI. I forget what Lonnie tells us, we're all global Smithsonian, so we're here to assist you. We want to bring your visions to light. Money's hard to talk about, and so if we just talk about it right up front, we can hopefully make the process go really easy.
Thank you.
Anything else? 11 o'clock. I don't want to go over. Perfect. What timing? I estimated my time correctly. I'll hang out over by the stairs in case there's more questions, but I will hand it over to the next speaker. Thanks, everyone.